E-learning versus classroom learning, which is more effective? Over the past decade, electronic learning has become more of the norm when taking our classes. Today, we'll be looking at blended learning through electronic learning, comparing the effectiveness of online classroom versus classroom setting, and we'll get to hear students' perceptions of taking an online course versus taking a class face-to-face. So in our first article, is blended e-learning as measured by an achievement test and self-assessment better than traditional classroom learning for vocational high school students? By Chi Chen Chang, Kianming Xu, Chaoyan Liang, Ji Shi Seng, and Yu Sheng Su. Sorry if I pronounce her names wrong. They took a group of vocational students and divided into two groups. The control group, which is the online class, and the experimental group, which is the classroom setting class. And they did some tests of knowledge and self-assessment to see where the students struggled and where they saw improvement. And based on the research that they did, they found out that there was no subsequent differences in achievement test scores in both blended e-learning and traditional classroom learning. In the self-assessment alone, for both experimental and the control group, the experimental group, which is the e-learning, earlier I said it was the control group, wasn't my mistake. They achieved higher self-assessment scores than the control group, the classroom learning. In the both group scores through blended e-learning, students in both groups obtain highest self-assessment scores through blended e-learning. So here we see that there wasn't any differences between the experimental and control group in the achievement test scores. The experimental group, though, achieved the higher test scores for the self-assessment test than the control group did, which is the classroom setting. And when both groups, through blended e-learning, they both attained higher self-assessment scores through blended e-learning. So in this one, for me at least, it seems that blended e-learning helped a lot more than in the classroom setting, as there wasn't any differences when they both were in the blended e group. So now we move over to our second article, which is comparing the effectiveness of classroom and online learning, teaching research methods, by Anna Yani. She compares the effectiveness between online learning and classroom learning. So through this, she used different ways of comparing it. She used mode, sense of instructor, control, and discussion, group dynamics, rejoining, feedback, and divergence / choice control. In the first couple ones, through mode, through online, instructed through text, not very dense, and through classroom, it is more common. So in that one, the way the online setting was, they found it easier than in the classroom. Or I should say that the one on the online is less effective than the one in the classroom. And then sense of instructor control. Online, there is less instructor control. Face-to-face, more sense of leadership through the instructor. So online, because they didn't have to face the instructor face-to-face, there was less instructor control compared to when they're in class. There's more control because the professor's right there. And then in discussion, online group contact is contained, while face-to-face it is not easily maintained. So in discussions online, it's more contained because they probably can get on whenever they want compared to when it's face-to-face. Face-to-face, you're there and sometimes the teacher's boring or whatever, so you can't really gain that focus when the teacher is lecturing. As in online, they can get on whenever they want, so they can, whenever they feel motivated, they can get on and study or whatever. And then in the next ones, group dynamics. Online, there is a less sense of anxiety in the beginning, whereas through face-to-face, anxiety is present in the beginning. So here, when we start class, especially now with the pandemic, when we start classes online, we don't get that sense of anxiety because we're online, we're in our own home, comfortable in our own bed. But when we go to school on our first day, we feel that anxiety because we're there, we're there with the teacher's talking to us, and it's like the first day when you go to work or whatever, like you just feel that anxiety. And then rejoining. High psychological/emotional stress and rejoining through online and face-to-face stress of rejoining is neutral. So it's more stressful to join online than face-to-face. It's more of a neutral face-to-face, I guess. I would see it as the other way around, but I guess that's what came out with this. Feedback is more common and very detailed in an online setting and face-to-face. Less feedback results in less detail given in the classroom setting. So yeah, online, I guess, because they don't have the pressure of being in front of the classroom, speaking out in front of the whole class. There's more feedback than when they're there in the classroom. When they're in the classroom, they probably get embarrassed, nervous, to talk out loud. So here they saw that there was more feedback. And then there's divergence, less choice control, which is flexible on joining online and more strict joining in class. Like earlier, this also talks about how being online, it's flexible. You can go on, especially down with the Zoom meetings where it's recorded or whatever, and you can't make it, you go on later. As in with class, like sometimes, it's required to be there. You have to be there and there's no choice, So now that we talked about that, we can go to the student perceptions. So in the students' perceptions of e-learning versus classroom learning by Aytekin Isman, Zara Altmay Ghazi, and Altmay Aksal, they discuss the perceptions that students face while taking online classes. So the research was based on the perception of 12 students. Students 1 and 4 thought that learning online was better because it's more flexible and it's a quote-unquote time saver. It lessens the stress of getting up and going to school. Students 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 thought the classroom experience is more effective as it builds a student and teacher relationship and it aids with the interaction between the two. So they thought that going to the classroom instead of taking online is better because they build a student-teacher relationship and it helps with questions that they have whether like online they can't, sometimes the teachers won't answer the questions or they feel that they're not learning as much. And then student 3 shared contrast between both fields of learning. So student 3 was the only one who found problems with both versions. I guess, they don't like going to school or something. And those are the 3 articles about e-learning versus online learning. So in conclusion, is e-learning the new way of learning? I feel it's not really. I rather prefer the traditional learning. In the past year, last year I only took 1 online class, but then the pandemic hit, so they all had to be online. And it's been good for me so far, but then this year it really hit me hard because I'm taking anatomy, both lab and lecture. So that I would prefer it face-to-face all the way. But because of this, I can't, so it's a harder time for me, especially with the class where it's just like work after work after work after work. And then the 2 articles out of the 3 claims that e-learning is a stronger alternative towards classroom learning. Yeah, we saw with the blended e-learning and the comparing effectiveness that they had a stronger conclusion that e-learning is better for students compared to learning. And in the other one, while the students' perception article, due to the research of students, found that the classroom learning is a better alternative due to a growing interaction between student and teacher. In the student perceptions one, it was clear that the classroom setting was better. Only 2 out of the 12 students thought the online The online learning was better because of it was more flexible and a time saver. And then student 3 had problems with both. So now when it was clear that the classroom setting was in favor. And that's it on e-learning versus classroom learning. I hope it was insightful, and I hope you got more information than you didn't have before.